Comics and History presents a second look at Dean Stahl's Headlocks and Headaches, aka Postscript to episode number 60. Hi everybody, I am your host, Brian J. Rygate, and class is back in session for a very special episode of Comics and History. You'll note that this is an unnumbered episode, and you may be wondering, what's the deal? Where is episode number 105 with our look at Chapter House Comics and the creation of the Chapterverse? And that's still coming your way, folks. It's going to be a little over 2 weeks away from now. Given the theme of the work which I'm covering today, this episode is initially being presented to you on a Friday as opposed to the usual Monday release date. That's because I wanted to get this episode out to you guys, especially those of you who are professional wrestling fans, ahead of this year's SummerSlam and NXT Brooklyn 3. And those are taking place this weekend. So for those of you guys who enjoy professional wrestling and WWE, you've got this episode to help get you jazzed for this weekend's events. Or if you're listening to this on the usual Monday, well, you've got this to keep up your pro wrestling enthusiasm after both NXT TakeOver and SummerSlam. Now, I've been waiting a whole heck of a long time to put this episode together. Just about 2 full years, to be exact. And for those of you guys who have been listening to this show for a while, you may recall when I recorded episodes 59 and 60. Episode 59 was my send-off episode where I announced the impending arrival of my daughter Victoria. And on that episode, I talked about my plan to go on hiatus for roughly 3 months. So that would have covered August through early October of 2015. And I remember talking on that episode about how when the show came back, it would be different. It would be much shorter, probably about 20 minutes in length, not as in-depth. And, well, we all know how that turned out. But what exactly was it that got me to come out of hiatus much earlier than I did? Well, after spending 3 weeks with my daughter in the NICU, I had about a week and a half off in my summer vacation before I had to go back to school. And I was just looking for something different to read during the quiet moments when my daughter was having her naps. And I came across my friend Dean Stahl's Headlocks and Headaches. I'd known Dean for some time through Facebook, and it was just during those last 10 days of my vacation where I thought, I need to try out Dean's Headlocks and Headaches. I owe it to the man. He's been a good friend of the show. And so I went to Comixology, and I was able to download the first 2 issues of Dean's Headlocks and Headaches series. It is a 3-part story. And so I had the first 2 issues to talk about on episode number 60. And wow, was recording episode number 60 a trial of errors. Back in those days, Victoria as she does now, loves her sleep. You give her some milk, you put her down, and she'll nap for at least a couple of hours. And I mean, it was even longer back when we first brought her home. I remember giving her her milk and setting her down for her nap so that I could record episode number 60, in which I reviewed Headlocks and Headaches, and Victoria would not sleep. And it wasn't on her. It had to do with the fact that there was a lot of construction going on with regards to the exterior walls in my apartment building. It's an older building which we live in, and so some of the exterior walls had been crumbling. So that summer, a construction team was in to drill away the decaying walls and to start preparing the walls for reconstruction. So on that day when I was recording episode number 60, the crew was out in full force with their drills and their jackhammers, and it was just intermittent, where they would pause, but then they would go on these long stretches where they were drilling. And it just so happened that they were drilling right near my unit, and so poor Victoria just could not get to sleep consistently. So if you go back and listen to episode number 60 at your own risk, I might add, you'll hear me putting the recorder on pause. You'll hear me coming back and apologizing to Dean and to the listeners more than once. Finally, near the end of episode number 60, I had my iPhone in one hand to record the show, and I had Victoria in my other arm. And normally on a day where there's a lot of interruptions, I would just say, okay, it's not going to work out today. It's just not meant to be. And I'll put the phone away and I'll say, okay, well, tomorrow's another day. But episode 60 was recorded on the very last day of my summer vacation, and I didn't really know how soon I would be able to get back into the recording booth. So that's why I went ahead and I posted episode 60 as it was. But ever since then, I've carried a silent vow to myself that when issue 3 of Headlocks and Headaches was released, I would read it and I would come back and I would talk about Dean Stahl's Headlocks and Headaches one more time. And so here we are now. And the release of this episode is perfect because for those of you who have not read this series before, going by the title Headlocks and Headaches, this is a wrestling story. And like Dean, I am a big fan of professional wrestling. So not only am I excited to talk about Headlocks and Headaches on the show because I consider Dean a friend of mine, but I just really love wrestling as well. And getting to read a wrestling comic book is awesome. Before I get talking about Dean Stahl and his art in general, I just want to share with you guys a story of how I know Dean. And I mentioned this back on episode 60, so if you remember me telling the story back then, please humor me. This is for the benefit of newer listeners. So I've been recording since the spring of 2014, and I guess it was near the fall of 2014 where I logged into my Spreaker account to edit some of my account settings. I noticed there was a tab, a followers tab, and I thought, probably nobody's there, but why don't I just click on the tab, see if anybody's following me. And I found that one of my students at the time was a follower. I found a couple of other podcasters were also following comics and history. And then I noticed Dean's name. And I had an epic brain freeze at this point because I had heard Dean's name mentioned on at least a couple of other podcasts. I'd heard him interviewed on at least one other show. but I was just looking at my screen. Is it Dean Stahl? Name's familiar. I don't know where I've heard that name before. I started saying his name out loud. Dean Stahl. Dean Stahl. Dean. Oh my God, it's Dean Stahl, the comic book artist. For a rookie podcaster like me, this was a big honor to have a real live comic book writer and artist following my show. And since then, I've had chances to talk back and forth with Dean over social media. I've never had the pleasure or the honor of meeting Dean in person, but hopefully one day down the line that will change. So over the remainder of this episode, I am going to talk about headlocks and headaches. I will give you a broad synopsis of the three-parter without getting too spoilery, since this is a newer publication. Issue 3, I want to say, has been out for only a few weeks on Comixology. I'm not going to be going page by page, panel by panel with spoilers, but I want to give you enough to whet your appetite if you have not given Headlocks and Headaches a read just yet. But before I do that, I do want to talk about Dean Stahl and his art in general. So to begin, Dean is a Michigan-based comics artist. I'm going to put links to his various web pages in the show notes on the Comics and History Facebook page. So please do check back at the C&H Facebook page to get links to Dean's various websites to check out his many different pieces of art. I actually own one physical piece of Dean's art. It's a print of Freddie Mercury, the late singer from Queen, as Han Solo, and it's just brilliant. It shows Freddie Mercury, one of his more iconic poses, where he's got one arm up in the sky, his head's looking down, and he's wearing the white shirt, the black vest and pants that Han wore at different points in the iconic Star Wars trilogy. And it's just a beautiful piece of art. Dean's art covers a variety of genres. Of course, he's drawn superheroes during his career. Just thinking of his Superman. His Superman has a very unique look. His Superman has a very powerful and noble expression. And you may be saying, well, yeah, but a lot of artists make Superman very powerful and noble, but there's something about the way that Dean draws Superman's face. It's very different. It's unlike any other artist's depiction of Superman that I've seen before, and I really like it. I also really like Dean's take on female superheroes. His Wonder Woman looks incredibly powerful. She is a true warrior princess. I gotta look at one of his She-Hulk prints. Just incredible. His She-Hulk is someone who you would not want to mess with anywhere. I was also looking recently at a piece of work that Dean did of Harley Quinn, and it looked fun, but at the same time, this was the strongest, most powerful Harley Quinn I had ever seen. I would say that Dean is very capable of drawing over-the-top characters, whether it be in terms of their personalities or their looks. And so on that count, that's why I'm really impressed with how he draws superheroes, because they can be very colorful and very over-the-top. Think of other highlights from Dean's career. Just recently, he did a series of prints of various incarnations of the Doctor from Doctor Who as different breeds of cats And I love seeing